Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom. I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman. It's Thursday, the 13th of June, day 251 of the October 7th war. 8 months since the Hamas army of terror invaded our country and carried out their appalling atrocities. For the avoidance of doubt in relation to discussions in the media about negotiations, Israel insists that the war will not end until all of its goals are met. Firstly, the return of all our hostages. Secondly, dismantling of Hamas's governmental and military capabilities. And finally, removing the terrorist threat from Gaza. The precise framework proposed by Israel during the negotiations maintains this principle while establishing conditions for transition between the stages. All of our objectives are within reach. This war could end this afternoon if Hamas lay down their arms and release all of our hostages. We'll begin today with an update on IDF casualties. Since the outset of the war, IDF fatalities have unfortunately risen to 650. I have the unenviable task to tell you about the passing of Sergeant Almog Shalom, who was just 19 years old, from Kibbutz Hamadiyah. He was killed in battle in southern Gaza. Sergeant Yair Levin was also just 19 years old and was from Givat Harel. Sergeant Eitan Karlsbrunn was 20 and from Modi'in Maccabim Reut. And Major Tal Pshebilski Shaolov was just 24 and from Gadera. All four fell in battle in the south of Gaza. There are no words of mine that can adequately assuage the pain of their parents and their families. We embrace them and those dear families who have lost their precious heroes, sons and daughters in this war for our very existence. The price of war is, of course, very heavy and painful. Each casualty is a world unto itself. May their memories be a blessing forever. Now to the north of Israel, I can confirm that the IDF targeted Sami Taleb Abdullah, commander of Hezbollah's Nasser unit, one of Hezbollah's most senior men in southern Lebanon. For years, this man planned and carried out terrorist attacks against our people here in Israel. Together with 3 Hezbollah terrorists, they are no more. But even before that targeting, killing, elimination of that terrorists, there has been a dramatic increase in Hezbollah rockets, missiles and drone attacks. These have caused fires not only in Israel, but also in Lebanon. In Lebanon, fires were actually ignited inside civilian residential areas by the rocket fire itself. Using the same Iranian playbook, like Hamas, Hezbollah terrorists systematically embed itself in civilian areas, risking the safety of Lebanese civilians and cynically exploiting them as human shields. Whether through diplomatic efforts or otherwise, Israel will restore security on our northern border. Israel will respond with force to all aggressions by Hezbollah. Lebanon and Hezbollah, under the guidance of Iran, bear full responsibility to the deterioration of the security situation in the north, in full violation of UN Security Council resolutions 1559 and 1701. Next, I want to update you on the hostage release pause. We've said for a long time now that we are committed to bringing back all of our 120 hostages, among them women and children and the elderly, who are still cruelly held in Hamas captivity for over 8 months now. As Secretary of State Blinken has confirmed, it's Hamas. Hamas are the ones who are preventing a hostage release deal and continue to unreasonably demand that the IDF exit Gaza and end the war in a way that leaves the Hamas reign of terror intact, which will enable it to repeatedly commit atrocities such as the October 7th massacre. In the words of Secretary Blinken, just yesterday, he said, quote, "At some point in a negotiation, and this has gone back and forth for a long time now, you get to a point where if one side continues to change its demands, including making demands and insisting on changes for things that it had already accepted, you have to question whether they're proceeding in good faith or not," end quote. It's also been reported that the Palestinian kidnappers forced our hostages to read the Quran and say Islamic prayers every day. Hostages have spoken to the media about being tied up by their feet and hands for the first 3 months. Andrei Kozlov spoke of being constantly very scared. Hamas told hostages for months falsely that Israel wanted to kill them all, claiming that they were a problem for Israel. So much so that when soldiers actually arrived to save the hostages, it took him some time to realize that they had come to rescue him. Andrei said that he was not seen as human by Hamas. There were daily beatings. At the hottest time of the day, they would cover him with blankets. Dehydration. He said Hamas were trying not to leave physical marks, but doctors in charge of medical treatment for the 4 Israeli hostages that we secured their release, that we rescued, said that they were beaten while in Hamas captivity. Medical professionals described very harsh treatment with much abuse, almost every day. So physical and mental abuse, often beyond comprehension. Doctors said that they are all malnourished, that they had no protein, so their muscles are extremely wasted. There is damage to some other systems because of that. Food and water was unstable, psychological stress, malnutrition, not the right kind of food, medical neglect, and also, of course, being in a limited space and very, very rarely actually seeing the sun, with no access to basic facilities like a shower. Next to Rafah in Gaza, where we are taking apart Hamas's intelligence taking apart Hamas with intelligence-based targeted operations, which have led to targeted raids. The IDF have located in the last 24 hours weapons, launch sites with rockets ready to fire at Israel, and we've eliminated several terrorists in close quarter battles. Troops have eliminated more than 10 terrorists, including one who actually took part in the October 7th massacre. Moreover, over the last day, our Air Force has struck and dismantled over 45 terror targets throughout Gaza, military structures, armed terrorist cells, rocket launchers, tunnel shafts, and terrorist infrastructure. Next to the United Nations, you know, the last 2 days has seen an onslaught from the United Nations against this country. Hamas terrorists attacked Israel on October 7th during a Jewish high holiday. On the Jewish high holiday of Shavuot, just yesterday, the Pillay Commission of Inquiry chose that date, just yesterday, to publish its latest biased reports attacking Israel. You know, the UN is imbued with credibility and respect that it just does not deserve. So many willfully ignore the glaring shortcomings of the United Nations. So here are some facts, as we like to say here in the Prime Minister's office, the facts don't lie. UN institutions have been hijacked by undemocratic countries that seek to advance objectives that threaten liberal democracies like Israel and other peace-loving nations in the world. So there's an inherent bias against Israel at the United Nations. Of the 193 members of the UN General Assembly, only 84, that's not even half, only 84 can be called free societies with freedom of the press, with free and democratic elections. Now, this same General Assembly issues more condemnations against Israel than the rest of the world combined. The rest of the world combined do not even come close to the number of condemnations from the United Nations against this small country. In 2022, 15 resolutions were passed against Israel, and not a single resolution was passed on the human rights situation in China, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Cuba, Turkey, Egypt, Zimbabwe, Pakistan, Qatar, Vietnam, or Algeria. On the other hand, Iran, Syria, North Korea, and Myanmar each received a grand total of 1 resolution. As for the UN Human Rights Council, where this latest maligning of this country has emanated from, the UNHRC, the UN Human Rights Council, of its 47 members, only 13 out of 47 can be defined as fully economically and politically free. The UNHRC is dominated by countries that don't respect human rights. These majority voting blocs are to a large extent made up of autocratic regimes. How on earth can Israel take seriously attempts to judge it, especially by repressive and authoritarian regimes? So let me be absolutely clear, so there is no doubt. Israel rejects the vile accusations published in yesterday's report. We reject them wholeheartedly. Equating the democratic country of Israel with the terrorist murderers of Hamas is obscene, and the UN should be ashamed of themselves. Now an update from COGAT and their work coordinating aid into Gaza, the usual daily reminder that, once again, thanks to the inefficient UN, the contents of over 1,000 aid trucks still currently await being picked up on the Gazan side, of Kerem Shalom. So since the beginning of this war, more than 35,000 trucks have delivered 668,000 tons of aid to Gaza. More than enough food to feed every single person in Gaza. More food enters Gaza every day, indeed 80% more food compared to what was entering Gaza prior to October the 7th. So with that, that's the end of our briefing today. I will now take your questions, which you should put in the chat of this call together with your news outlet. Thank you very much. First question from David Clement at the News Forum. The question is, Iraq's foreign minister has expressed concern that Israel will escalate in southern Lebanon and that the war could expand regionally. Can the Prime Minister's office comment on his concerns? Thank you for that very much for that question, David. We've made our points crystal clear when it comes to the increase in attacks from Iran's Hezbollah from southern Lebanon and Syria into Israel, up to more than 200 attacks against this country, whether diplomatically or looking at the ways which Israel has defended itself and destroyed Hamas. We will go down one of those two routes. And I've made my points clear in the briefing, which you've just heard, so you can play the tape. Next question from TV2 Norway. Rumours are circulating online that Israel is considering leaving the United Nations following their decision yesterday. Do you have any comments on this? I've seen that report. I haven't got anything to add to that. Either way, that's not something I recognise in any way, shape or form. But I have made clear our views on the UN. The UN is a terribly autocratic regime, organisation. It is highly inefficient. It's dominated by it's dominated by autocratic regimes. You know, there's a quote I always remember which comes from Israel's famous, unmatchable diplomat Abba Eban, and he said, I quote, "If Algeria introduced a resolution that the earth was flat, but it was Israel that flattened it, it would still pass by 164 in favor, 13 against, with 26 abstentions." So that, I think, is a reflection of how we feel about the United Nations. This country is constantly maligned by the United Nations. More resolutions against this tiny country than against Syria, of which 500,000 people were killed in the civil war in Syria. I've made my points clear on the United Nations, and I've made them in this statement, which you can see if you play the tape. Next question from Alison Horn from ABC News. What is Israel's reaction to the UN's Children and Armed Conflict report that has put Israel's armed forces on a list of groups that harm children? I've made my points absolutely crystal clear on this, Alison, in the statement I made. I'm happy to send you a copy of that statement which adequately reflect Israel's views on that misguided report. They are also available on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, as well as the Israel's UN representative in Geneva on their Twitter feed. On its X feed, we've made a comprehensive reply to those lies which have been made against us. Next question from Lior from the Washington Post. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken criticized yesterday's Hamas response to Israel's deal proposal, saying it included some changes that are not workable. What is Israel's response to Hamas's statement? What is Israel's response, Lior? Time and time again, and this is reiterated not just by Israel, by the US, by Egypt, by Qatar, and they will echo these words. It is Hamas which walks away, which plays ridiculous games. I think the statement I read out from Secretary Blinken about their games they're playing, about agreeing to certain aspects and then going back on them and then changing their mind, or one of their favorite ridiculous things which they do, Hamas, is to announce, produce a press release, say that they have agreed to the latest proposal. And then, of course, when you look at the proposal they've agreed to, they've changed lots of aspects to it to make it impossible for any right-thinking country to agree to them. So we're used to unfortunately, we're sadly used to their games, their ridiculous games that we play. More fool journalists that read out the Hamas press releases and then read them back to me, which I find absolutely shocking. We are constantly receiving messages from Hamas have said X, Y, and Z, and it's plainly nonsense. Just a quick reminder, my friends, that Hamas are a genocidal, murderous organization that murdered families together, that killed children in front of their parents and parents in front of their children. Maybe some of the world has forgotten these things. We in Israel have not forgotten these things. And it's because this genocidal organization wishes to remain in power over Gaza, wishes to remain in power in Gaza, that we simply refuse to live next to this genocidal organization. Yes, this war began on October 7th, but before that there were terror attacks, rocket and missile launches against our country, thousands upon thousands of them. Of course, very rarely reported by the international media because, of course, these rockets are only falling on Israelis' heads, so maybe that's not newsworthy. But we understand that this terrorist organization wishes to carry out October the 7th again, and we will not allow that to happen. Next question from Hannah Julian. From the Jewish Press, the Political Security Cabinet is not set to meet until Sunday, but things appear to be heating up fast in the north. Does the Prime Minister plan to bring that meeting forward, given the escalation? Thank you for that question, Hannah. When and if there are additional meetings of the Security Cabinet or any other part of Israeli Cabinet, when they are set to meet, we will, of course, let you know in the usual way. Question from Joel Pollock at Breitbart News, who says, Happy Shavuot. Israel has a clear set of goals in the war with Hamas. Is there a clear set of goals that Israel can articulate with regard to Hezbollah? Perhaps a set of demands that would be necessary to avoid war? Thank you for that question, Joel. We've made our points very clear in the briefing which I just gave. You can play back the tape. But just as a reminder, we've received more than 200 missiles, rockets, drones upon this country in our north. We've got more than 60,000 people displaced in a most appalling way. No other country would put up with any of that sort of flagrant aggression. We've received thousands of rockets and missiles since October the 7th. They started almost immediately, and we've made our points extremely clear on the way we're dealing with Iran's Hezbollah. We've made clear that whether through a diplomatic resolution or through a military resolution, a resolution will come. Peace will return to the northern part of this country and the south and every single part of this country. Israel refuses to make this a reality which is an acceptable reality. It is not acceptable reality. Our people must be allowed to return home. And of course, our northern border, it will be defended, whether through a diplomatic means or through military means. Take a look at how Gaza looks at the moment. We will defend our country. Next question from Fred Ager from Interplanetary Television. The economic strain and psychological stress persist amongst reservists and their families despite the $2.5 billion package passed in January, the Labour Union with the Labour Union agreements of February and the laws passed in May against dismissals and the deterioration of working conditions. Has the Prime Minister considered drafting a new socio-economic package to support financially and psychologically soldiers and their families currently on duty? Thank you for that question there, Fred. We've made some announcements recently about additional aid to support our soldiers. We are extremely proud of what our soldiers have achieved, but of course it is a very heavy burden put on all of the people of this country. But they have answered the call to duty with a determination and a love for this country and a concern for their fellow human being. Very often when you ask people in the military why they're fighting, you expect them to say that they're fighting for Israel, for the people that live here in Israel. But what they very often say is that they're fighting for civilization. This is a fight of barbarism against civilization. The sort of treatment which our poor hostages have received by Hamas is an indication of the type of Islamofascism which these Islamic fundamentalists, sponsored by Iran, wish to impose on this country, but your country as well. Any free democracy is an enemy of Iran. But we are on the front line of this battle, and we will be successful. Second question from Fred Ager regarding the Eliran Mizrahi case, who was diagnosed with PTSD after being assigned to clear the bodies of the Supernova music festival and took his life. Extremely sad case. Has the Prime Minister considered changing the IDF rules on military burials to recognise all soldiers? Thank you very much for that question there, Fred. It is indeed a very, very sad case that you're talking about there. I have seen those reports, but I haven't got anything more to add on that very sad death of that soldier. And we, of course, use this opportunity to send our condolences to this man's family. He has, of course, he's lost his life, but we understand how terrible that must be for his family. And all of us here in Israel send him our condolences as one of our sons. Question from Jim Williams of Zenga International News. Despite good faith diplomacy by Israel, the US, Qatar, Egypt and others that have stalled, does the PM in Israel feel any deal can be reached as long as Sinwar is handling the deal making for Hamas? Thank you for that question, Jim. You know, for all of us here in Israel, Sinwar is the epitome of evil. We're often asked to peek into his head, and sometimes the question is asked, why should he sign a deal when it is effectively pushing him out of power? You know, and the answer we give is that we can't, you know, I'm not a terrorist. I work for a democracy with free elections and a free press and a free media and a free judiciary and a parliament and one person, one vote. And none of those things exist in Hamas. None of those things exist in Gaza. He is the epitome of evil, and he should know that we're going after him. He knows that we're going after him. Him and his henchmen, they will be destroyed one way or another. Their reign of terror is coming to an end. We are closing in on them. As to any other thoughts about Sinwar, for us, all of us here in Israel, he is evil personified. Evil personified. Next question from Jody Cohen. Hezbollah has today claimed responsibility for its largest rocket barrage since the 8th of October, when it joined in the war. David, you suggested that Israel will defend itself from Hezbollah rocket fire and would pursue diplomatic and other means to do this. Can you tell us about the diplomatic efforts which are underway? Thank you for that question, Jody. I'm not in a position to share with you what's going on, but as I made clear in my statement earlier, and you can play the statement, either way, diplomatically or militarily, peace will be returned to our north. Israel will defend itself. There should be no doubt about that whatsoever. Israel will defend itself. This cannot be a sustained reality of our people displaced and our towns emptied. Thankfully, they are largely free of civilians up north, because the results of each of these Hezbollah rockets would be absolutely catastrophic. But this country will be defended. Next question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Social media accounts claim that Israel is firing incendiaries at southern Lebanon. Is this true? Thank you, Joel. I've got no information on that whatsoever. It doesn't sound true. As I mentioned to you, it is Hezbollah fire itself, the rocket fire itself, which is causing fires. If you look at the IDF's Telegram channel, you can see a video for over the last, I think, 12 hours of rocket fire from southern Lebanon actually causing fires in civilian areas. So any sort of propaganda coming out from Hezbollah or in southern Lebanon or Iran that it's somehow Israel responsible, you know, it is Hezbollah which attacked us on October the 7th and 8th, and ever since that point. But this country will be defended. We've been absolutely clear about that point. But we'll always conduct this war within the confines of international law, especially when it comes to conflict. Next question from Hannah Julian from the Jewish Press. Second question: a new poll by the Palestinian Center for Political Studies and Surveys has found that 73% of respondents agreed Hamas made the right decision in going to war on October 7th, and 79% of respondents between Hamas believe that Hamas will win the war. Does the Prime Minister's office have a response to these findings? Thank you very much for that question, Hannah. You know, one of the most remarkable aspects of this entire war is that since October the 7th, when our people were massacred in the most inhumane way, the largest spate of Jew killing since the Holocaust, one of the most unsettling aspects is that the Palestinian Authority, which rules over the lives of most Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, they have yet to find the time in these 8 months. They have yet to find the time in 251 days. They have yet to find the time to condemn those murders, those rapes, those beheadings, those child killings, that hostage taking. They have yet to find a single moment in 251 days to condemn those killings. You know, you have quoted to me these the results of this survey. I've got no way of knowing whether that's correct or not. Unfortunately, it does sound as if it's correct. You know, what sort of leadership, once again, what sort of leadership does the Palestinian people have that lead them to this perpetual war, that never educate their young people about coexistence, about living together, about the possibility of ending this conflict? What sort of leadership do they provide to their people? Absolutely none. They seem to revel in perpetual bloodletting. They educate their children. The Palestinian Authority curriculum in schools still educates about killing Jews. Of course, the Palestinian Authority still pays the families of terrorists, the famous pay-to-slay policy, which is why that we believe very clearly that in terms of once Hamas is defeated, and of course that means once Hamas is defeated, afterwards we want a Gaza to be run by Gazans, but not Gazans that are intent on killing Jews, which is pretty much counts out the Palestinian Authority, who have not in 8 months, in 251 days, not found an opportunity, just for the simple phrase, we condemn the Hamas barbaric attack of October the 7th. They don't do it. They provide no leadership whatsoever inside the Palestinian Authority. They provide no hope with the current Palestinian Authority leadership to provide any sort of resolution or any sort of potential peace partner for the people of Israel. And they just provide misery for their own people. So, further question from TV2 Norway. Is Israel scared of an escalation with Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies? So thank you for that question from Norway. Norway, of course, is a country that has chosen to reward Hamas for their appalling massacre on October the 7th. While other countries have been appalled by it, I've read that the Norwegian foreign minister withheld an opportunity for the royal family to send a condolence letter. The simple condolence letter was prevented by the Norwegian foreign minister, and they took the appalling road to recognize and to reward this terrorist onslaught. What sort of message we say to Norway? What sort of message does that give to the peacemakers in this region? The message is very, very clear from Norway. Produce terrorist atrocities and you'll get what you want. That's the way to pursue the Palestinian self-determination agenda. That is an appalling thing to have done. It is, of course, against the Oslo Accords. So Norway, you have taken a path which is actually against the Oslo Accords, which specifically demanded that no unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state would happen before a comprehensive peace deal. So you violated your own accords. Now, in terms of your question about being scared of an escalation with Hezbollah, there is no one in this country that is scared. You will find here determination to see down this terrorist onslaught. We will stand up to Hezbollah, whether through diplomatic resolution or militarily. Our army is strong, our people are determined. There is unity in this country for making sure that terrorists, whether they come from any one of the 7 fronts which we're facing, from Iraq, from Yemen, from the Houthis in the Red Sea, from Iran, from Lebanon, from Hamas, from terrorists in Judea and Samaria, from any of those 7 fronts that we're facing, we will defend ourselves, and this country will live in peace and in freedom, and we are determined to return peace and get back to peace building in this region. We're particularly good. The Norwegians, of course, failed spectacularly, but we are particularly good at making peace in this region, and that is why we are determined to defend ourselves. I often get requests from Norway, and they quote to me Hamas spokespeople, and I must tell you that really is something appalling, to quote to us a terrorist organization that committed these terrible crimes against our people. We're on the front line of this terrorism. We're fighting against it, and whether Norwegians realize it or not, we're fighting against this terrorist onslaught for Norwegians as well. Okay, because this terrorism, it won't stop here. This Islamic fascist terrorism, it won't stop here. It will come to you too if we don't defeat it here. So, on that note, I think that's the last question. Thank you very much for joining us. The next briefing is scheduled to be on Monday. In the meantime, please do stay safe, and thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.